So whenever I get on YouTube these days, I've noticed a new genre of YouTube video that I'm being pushed. Well, there's actually several, one of which is, of course, America's on this horrible decline and our economy is about to crash. So that's cool. But no, there's another one as well. And it's ostensibly, let's shit all over Mark Calloway because he brought his wife on his podcast as a co-host, ditched the other guy. And now evidently it's completely unlistenable. That's a word, isn't it? Yeah, it is a word. And so I was like, okay, I'm kind of vaguely aware of like the events that led to this. Like Undertaker decided to take his podcast to Fanatics, where all the WWE stuff is. And then in the process of doing so, ditched his co-host Matt and then brought on Michelle McCool. And so, okay, you know, that happens, I guess. He's old, like super old. And he enjoys the company of his wife. Like, that's cool. I enjoy the company of my wife as well. She doesn't really know much about wrestling, so I've never really invited her on my show. I thought it was kind of interesting that all of a sudden you see a bunch of videos that are doing bonzo numbers, which might explain why I'm doing this video today. And I was like, Jesus, is this that big of a deal? You get on the YouTubes here and you can see right here, you just put in Undertaker podcast. This is just their podcast. There's clearly like an AI souped up version of their faces because that looks vaguely kind of. This is like Undertaker if he was wearing an Undertaker mask. Anyway, so the first one is, of course, James Romero, who's pretty well known in the whole wrestling YouTube sphere as facilitating a lot of podcasts with former wrestlers, which is a really smart business move, to be honest with you. But then, of course, he has his own channel as well, and he seems to be leading the charge on this Undertaker. The Undertaker's recent claims are delusional, and Undertaker here says, I never used my influence to get my wife several WWE jobs in 2025. I'm guessing that this is not a real quote from the Undertaker, but it's paraphrasing that Undertaker hasn't actually watched some of his, that Undertaker hasn't actually helped his wife, get the job on BFG, replacing Mickey James, and then, of course, on his own podcast. I saw one claim recently from Freddie Prinze Jr., where he claims that when he told Michelle McCool back in the day that he'd be, he's writing a story to take the title off her, and she freaked out and then went to management, and then Michael Hayes pulled him aside and said, hey, that's not happening because Undertaker put his foot down. And this apparently is refuting that. So apparently something that he said. But you got Stevie Richards getting in on the act. Apparently James told Stevie that this is big business because 323,000 views on this video is absolutely crazy. And it's the same thumbnail, but with Stevie Richards instead of James Romero. And then you got the Kurt Angle and an Undertaker thing here. I wonder what the comments have to say about this. Are the comments hopping in on this, on the celebration of being shitty to Undertaker and his wife? What does this say here? I take back every negative thing I said about Matt and his sandals. We took Matt for granted. Oh, so everybody's piling on. The podcast used to feel like I was in my best friend's man cave having a beer, hearing a Legends Road stories. Now it feels like I'm at a very important person's house having dinner. Man, I miss the laid-back vibe of the OG 6 Feet Under. Matt always starts the conversation and Taker just chimes in with cool stories. We want Matt. Undertaker is that husband that brings his wife on the boys' golfing trip. The aesthetics of the podcast don't even feel like Undertaker anymore. The theme isn't dark enough. I like that this is simply talking about the superficiality of the Undertaker podcast, because now they're filming this. It looks like it's in some sort of hotel. This is some sort of open space area. This is not a house because there's like a whole exit back here. This looks like some sort of convention space, perhaps. And you got Taker, you got Michelle, and you got Kurt Angle. I watched a little bit of this. Is this one of those like size thing stickers right here? No, I think that's just a label. This guy says, saw Angle and Taker and click, saw McCool and immediately closed the tab. Is it that bad? Welcome to the Mark McCool podcast. Oh my gosh. These people are wild. Dude, this podcast is so much better with Matt bringing back for at least an episode. Why is Michelle here? We want to hear Taker talk with his former rivals about their road trip stories and etc. And she kills the vibe. Never thought I would see the day that the Phenom became a simp. Oh my God. That is wild business. Here's James' initial one. which probably spurred him to make another one. That's what you got to do on YouTube. You make one video and it does really, really well, and then you got to make another one of the same ilk. Podcast ruined? James is so over it here in this video, apparently. People really seem to love The Undertaker's original podcast with Matt, or at least they took it for granted, because boy, oh boy, they really don't. So here's one. This one's almost got 100,000 views from Deontay DDJ. The Undertaker podcast drama. I watched, I mean, the funny thing is wow, Cronin even got 41,000 views here. Good for him. We got Kicking It with Ross. He got 43,000 views. We got, okay, I got to shout out Maven for this thumbnail, because I actually watched the clip where Matt talks about what happened with him and Taker. And he says, yeah, after we filmed our last episode, we went out to the car, or went out to the parking lot, and Taker just said, Matt, I'm moving on. I'm going to do something else. And it was like, okay, so I'm gone now. But he didn't really seem all that bent about it. I'd imagine he probably does get some amount of satisfaction out of the comments and whatnot, and how everybody's saying, hey, it's crap. I would feel pretty good. You know, I'm a petty person. I would probably feel really good if I heard everybody talking shit about the new thing that happened. You know, he brings his wife in there. I'm kind of torn about it, though. There was a video here from, here it is, The Rise and Fall of 6 Feet Under. That's the actual name of the Undertaker podcast. Let's go ahead and hear what they got to say.
As a wrestling YouTuber, I cannot stress enough that a guy like Matt is imperative to have on a podcast like this, because these boomer wrestlers do not know how to use technology.
That is the truest thing. That is so sad, but it's so true. People like Matt here, people like James Romero, they're kind of necessary for this kind of thing, because these old dudes don't know. Look, honestly, to me, this is like the easiest thing imaginable, but I've tried to teach this to people, and my God, even people that are like younger than me sometimes are like, what? How do you know, it is something that I've been doing for a very, very long time, and I kind of understand how it works. And obviously several people have made, you know, a pretty great living or a pretty great business model out of mining these old wrestlers for tales, because that's what everybody loves. If you look at the top wrestling podcasts, it's like out of the top 30, like 3 or 4 of them are people who have no connection to the actual wrestling business. And me and Larson are one of them, which is great. But it is inundated because people, I will say this, for a business that is so guarded and reluctant and resentful of people trying to learn more about what goes on behind the scenes, this is an inevitable and terrific source of post-wrestling life revenue for wrestlers out there. But you know what? Maybe I'm in the wrong here. Maybe it's so egregiously taken a turn for the worse that everybody is totally in the right, calling out The Undertaker for how shit his podcast has become. So I am going to do this. For the next hour, I'm going to listen to a half hour of one of the old school podcasts with Matt. And then I'm going to listen to like maybe a half hour of that Kurt Angle interview. And I'm going to see if there's that big of a difference, that if everybody's justified in just shitting all over poor Undertaker for his podcast after he brought his wife on. So I'll do that and I'll be back. All right, so this is what I did. It's a couple hours later now, and I listened to 2 giant chunks of the pre-Michelle McCool Undertaker podcast and the Kurt Angle Undertaker podcast with Michelle McCool there in attendance. Now, I know what I'm about to say might offend some of you, but I heard Diamond Dallas, because I listened to the Matt leaving one was the Diamond Dallas Page one. Matt didn't say a lot. Undertaker did kick in. Like, I listened to 2 chunks of it. Undertaker kicked in when it was appropriate, when he was sort of brought up in the story. But basically it was just like, we got to listen to DDP. And I've seen enough of the other clips of the Matt version of the Undertaker podcast to kind of get an idea for what it is. I'll be honest with you. The Kurt Angle one, I heard a whole lot of Kurt Angle talking. And then when it was stories about him and Undertaker, they went to split screen. It was the two of them. Now, I'm sure that people who are avid listeners of the podcast, who listen to everything that Undertaker has done on the podcast, probably, because obviously a podcast, it's got like, you're building a community, right? And even if Undertaker isn't sitting there responding to comments or whatnot, it does feel like you're kind of part of something. Like one of those comments I read said, this used to feel like I was hanging out with some dudes, in a basement or something. And I can understand whenever you make a change in the cast, it's going to change the chemistry. And obviously when you add somebody who is the relationship of Michelle McCool to The Undertaker, it's going to change the chemistry. But Undertaker never really seems like he's upset that she's there. At least in the stuff that I watched. I watched a couple clips, but she let Kurt Angle just talk and talk and talk and talk. I heard the section where he was talking about wrestling on the Olympics, which was gnarly. I never knew it was all like that. And then a chunk when he was talking about making into the WWF, and Undertaker talking about, how he transitioned into comedy and how he had taken himself kind of seriously. Michelle didn't really speak up all that much. So I kind of feel like, for the people who are much more casual listeners to the podcast, probably you won't notice a huge difference, because whenever I see an interesting clip on YouTube, I'll listen to it. And most of the time it's pretty interesting. It's like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. I didn't know that, even if it's a Michelle McCool edition. But for people who are super into it, I can understand why the change would be a lot different. That being said, in the end, the dude gave 30 plus years from like 91 to whatever it was. He gave a long time to the industry, decades where he didn't even break character in public. That entire time, he was not Mark Calloway. He was The Undertaker. What are you doing here? I got a cat just roaming on through the set here. You're like the Michelle McCool. Everybody's going to be like, I miss Gypsy Bug. So do I. I love my cat. So anyways, I didn't notice a huge difference when it came to kind of the important aspect of the podcast, which is the meat of what the guest is talking about. But what I was saying was, before I was rudely interrupted by Cat, the guy put his time in. If he wanted Michelle McCool there, then I think he should be allowed to have Michelle McCool there without everybody pitching a fit about it. But then I say that as a happily married man. So if y'all want to rage, Matt didn't even really say anything. And all those comments were like, I want Matt. I miss Matt. And she wasn't even really saying anything all that much. So I don't know. I get it though. People don't like change. And everybody's like, oh my God, she must have him under her No, he's just married, dude. He's just married and he enjoys hanging out with his wife. Oh my God, that's really not that bad of a thing. But if you disagree, let me know in the comments below. I'm sure there are some of you who are avid listeners to the 6 Feet Under podcast, and you're probably like, oh yeah, there is a total vibe shift that sort of doesn't make it the way it was before. And I get that. I understand. Totally understand. Anyways, sound off in the comments below. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. Till next time, I'll see you guys around.